Hello and welcome to another episode of Coping with COVID-19. My name is Michael Curran from the Ottawa Business Journal. Today we go behind the headlines with two of OBJ's editors. The goal is to update our audience with some of the top stories of the past few days. Let's introduce our editors now. First off, we've got Peter Kovessy, OBJ's head of content. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Mike.
And next, we've got David Sali, who's leading up a lot of our daily live reporting. Hello, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Mike. Thanks.
So we've got a bunch of stories to get through. Let's get right into this. Peter, we're going to start with you. Today, some unemployment stats came out. Do you want to give us an update on what the unemployment situation is looking like in Ottawa, Peter?
So on Friday, Statistics Canada released its latest labor force numbers, and the significance of it is it really gave us a bit more of a sharper picture as to the fallout of all the measures that have been put into place to help contain the spread of COVID-19. So the headline figures that Ottawa-Gatineau's unemployment rate rose to 6.9%. And just to put that into a little bit of context, at the beginning of the year, back when our economy was firing on all cylinders, the unemployment rate was down at 4.3%. So far, we've seen in 2 months that some 46,000 jobs have been lost just here in the National Capital Region alone. Couple key takeaways, of course, some sectors are being hit harder than others. No surprise, it's that the retail as well as the hospitality sector, accommodations and food services, that is the hardest hit. What I found kind of interesting, though, is that even though the scale, of course, of all these of what's happening right now is really, really unprecedented, by historic levels, you only have to go back about 4 years. So back when the federal government was really in belt tightening mode to sort of see the unemployment rate and employment levels where they are today. So. Certainly, the National Capital Region is still in better shape than a lot of other parts of the country, but I don't think that we've sort of seen the full impact of all the business closures and cutbacks yet show up in these stats.
There's always some question, I think, Peter, as to how quickly unemployment stats will jump on to or will be reflected in some of the monthly reports. So is that possibly the case? Like when I hear 6.9%, I'm thinking, well, that doesn't even come close to reflecting the true rate of unemployment right now.
So you're absolutely correct. So I think that's a really, really important caveat, is that just because of the relatively small sample size, Statistics Canada, when they do present those monthly unemployment numbers, not to get too technical, but they do use a 3-month rolling average. So that means that still factors in figures from February and the first half of March, of course, when the economy was still firing on all cylinders. And as well, something we're hearing a lot as people pour over the unemployment numbers across the country is just how many of those people who do still have a job are either working, reduced hours, or are on potentially temporary layoff, or just collecting part of their salary. So you're absolutely correct. I think it does mask a lot of hardships that are being felt throughout the labor force.
Okay, Dave, I want to move to you now. Shopify is often thought of as the flagship company, certainly when it comes to the technology sector in Ottawa, and they had some quarterly earnings. Give us an update on what Shopify looked like this week.
Well, all things considered, with the state of the economy, things are looking very good for Shopify. In fact, it cracked a milestone this week. The shares went over $1,000 for the first time in the company's history. And in fact, briefly, Shopify was the country's most valuable company by market cap. It briefly edged past RBC late Wednesday. Since then, its shares have dropped a bit, and RBC has overtaken it again. But yeah, that just goes to show. I mean, it had a 47% jump year over year in first quarter revenues for the first 3 months of 2020 compared with last year. So $470 million in revenues. compared with 320 million US last year. And interesting, I found a couple of interesting things on the call with analysts. I thought Harley Finkelstein, the chief operating officer, had some really cool things to say about how companies that, at one time didn't used to really even consider e-commerce, or certainly on a business to consumer basis, are now jumping on board. So just in the last month, Heinz and chocolate maker Lindt have opened up Shopify Plus accounts. Those are two companies that never would have even considered that in the past, selling directly to consumers online. So as Harley said, this pandemic is forcing all kinds of merchants to rethink how they sell things, and you're seeing that the growth in new accounts on the Shopify platform grew 62% between March 30th and April 24th compared with the previous 6-week period. So you're just seeing this shift to online commerce really accelerate, and Shopify, doing what it does, is really poised to capitalize on that.
All right, so we're just talking about e-commerce. Let's shift into the physical world of commerce, Peter. And OBJ had a really interesting story that had a lot of reads on our website about the post-pandemic future of local shopping malls.
So as we're just talking about, the retail sector, of course, has been one of the industries that's been hardest hit by COVID-19. So our story, for me, there were two key key takeaways. Is that first off, we got a bit of a picture as to how the landlords behind major malls across Canada are faring. So for the regional malls, so those would be malls that fall into the category like the Rideau Centre, Bayshore, Saint Laurent. Across the country, landlords are reporting between 20 and 25% of tenants have not paid their rent since the pandemic started. For the community malls, so something a bit of a step down, the number climbs to 50%. And that's really significant because a lot of those community malls, even before the pandemic, were already struggling to attract a lot of foot traffic as they face more competition from online shopping, as well as the major regional shopping centers that were drawing more of the shoppers. What's interesting though is that we did speak to a couple of local retail analysts who really emphasized the need that as we start to pull out of the COVID-19 pandemic, for the need for mall owners to really reinvent their offerings. This is especially significant since in recent years, some of the big attractions in malls have been things like restaurants, fitness centers, really those sorts of offerings that are going to be potentially a bit of a tough sell as we do still have a bit of physical distancing. So some of the ideas that were sort of floated are things like concerts, new attractions that are basically going to have something a little bit special that essentially are going to make people feel excited and comfortable with the idea of going out to a shopping mall again.
Well, David, listen, why don't we go to our final topic and pivot a little bit towards the tourism industry here. We know that is besides retail, tourism has been devastated. I think you've reported, Dave, that about half the city's hotels are fully closed, and many others are suffering greatly. So let's talk about one of the iconic hotels in Ottawa. You had some news on the Chateau Laurier this week.
Yes, exactly, Mike. So as you said, about half the region's hotels have shut their doors since the pandemic began. I mean, there's just no traffic. No tourism traffic, no convention traffic. So that's really hit the industry hard. I mean, like 80% of the hospitality industries in the hotel. But one of those hotels has announced it will be coming back, and it's the Chateau Laurier, and they've chosen a very fitting day to come back. Considering what an iconic symbol of the nation's capital the Chateau Laurier is, it only makes sense that they would decide to reopen on Canada Day. I spoke to GM Rick Corcoran earlier this week. He said they did toss around a few other dates in June, but ultimately they decided, hey, why not open up? And as he said, as a kind of tribute to Canada, and their way to celebrate Canada Day along with their guests. Now, of course, reopening in the COVID era doesn't come without its challenges. Corcoran said the hotel's management is going to be maniacally, almost as he put it, devoted to making sure that the property is safe for employees and guests alike. So there's a number of procedures they're going to be implementing to ensure that. Just stepping up overall cleaning and sanitizing, things like reconfiguring the furniture in the lobby to make sure there's adequate social distancing and physical distancing. Things like the really commonly used facilities that are in more confined quarters, like the gym and swimming pool, they'll be open probably later and only by appointment at the beginning as a way of limiting contact between guests. Rooms, there's going to be a 48-hour buffer between check-in and check-out. Frequently touched objects like coffee makers are going to be taken out of the suites. There will be fewer towels and pillows in each suite, and rooms will only be cleaned upon request of the guests to limit the number of people entering the suites. So you just see it just goes to show just how impacted the industry really is. But at the same time, Corcoran told me he's not too worried about people coming back. He thinks Ottawa is well positioned to kind of have a resurgence of domestic tourism business pretty soon. And he's not worried about whether guests will feel comfortable staying in the hotel. He said that's not what's keeping him up at night. He said what is the global economic recovery and how soon guests from other countries will feel comfortable traveling again, and when that convention business will really return.
Yeah, we can hope, Dave, that that domestic, that rubber road type tourism travel. So, Ottawa does tend to be a bit of a destination from people from Montreal or Toronto and beyond. So hopefully we see those, and it helps the local hotels. We're going to wrap up here in a minute, but before we do, Peter, I want you to talk about two projects we have ongoing at OBJ. One is a new email newsletter and special report that's going out today. Tell us about that.
So today we launched the spring edition of OBJ's HR Update. Obviously, this is a very, very unique time for all industries, but the HR industry as well is facing a whole bunch of previously unthinkable questions, especially as we look towards reopening the economy and reopening offices. Is it reasonable, practical, or even allowable to take employees' temperatures as they come to the office? Will employees be wearing masks in the office? What happens when an employee might be afraid to come to work because they're fearful about bringing a virus home to an elderly family member? So that's the lead story in an HR update. But of course, there's all sorts of news stories affecting the HR industry. And the other new feature that we launched this month is a new philanthropy column. This is again another sector that's been quite impacted by COVID-19. So with well-known journalist, Ottawa journalist Sam Laprade, we've started shining a spotlight on major gifts in our community and the impact that they make.
Well, thanks, Peter. Listen, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to both of you for doing such a great job in leading our editorial coverage over the past few days and months. Please stay tuned for more episodes of Coping with COVID-19. You can visit us, of course, at obj.ca. You can check this out on our YouTube channel. In fact, if you do that, please subscribe to get notifications about when we're live. And of course, look to us on social media. That's all the time we have for today. I'm Mike Curran signing off for Dave and Peter Kovessy. Keep on watching for more news.